So, welcome to another round of Future Hamburg Talks on hydrogen. Due to the actual pandemic situation in a virtual room, my name is Heinrich Klingberg, and it is my pleasure today to welcome Michael Dammann, authorized officer of Gasnetz Hamburg GmbH, and Bert Kiewiet, manager hydrogen of Gasunie, Germany. Our aim in this talk is to illustrate the basic strategic orientations of both these companies, as well as give some insight how they prepare for the changes, especially in the gas grid, that we will see in the future. And of course, they will also give us some recommendations, what from their point of view needs to be done so that we really have a sustainable hydrogen economy, even from the infrastructure side, and what the specific role of the gas grid will be. So thank you for being with us here today. And I start with a question to Michael. When it comes to hydrogen, even experts mostly refer to, let's say, the industry or the mobility sector. And of course, everybody knows we need large quantities of hydrogen then, but the infrastructure for this large volume, we do not really give that much insight into. So in your view, as the local operator of the gas network in Hamburg, what role will the gas grid play in the future, and what do you see as the specific advantages to hydrogen with the gas grid?
Yeah, thank you, Heinrich. Well, we are thinking about the first step, hydrogen as a starting material for production process as well. And also we see in the heavy traffic use, but we also think about another industry needs, that's energy. And that's why we think that's not only the path for the raw material that we place hydrogen, we also need some replacement for the natural gas, and the natural gas is the heat requirements in all these cases in household, residential customers, but also for industry processes. And therefore, we concentrate at the beginning because of the load and the need, the huge amount of need of hydrogen. We concentrate at the beginning of the industry customers, but also we are thinking that there's some need for the connection, pipeline connected customers also in the heat sector.
So I understand that it's two aspects that you are heading for. One is to, so to speak, to save the gas grid even in times when the normal gas, due to the CO2 effects, is probably not being asked for in the future, even though that may be a long-term perspective, but even better. And also that you will use the grid specifically to supply to industry, for example, in the Hamburg area in general, and very much in the harbor. Are these the two objectives you're heading for?
Yeah, that's the huge amount of energy we need for hydrogen is in the industry sector. And but we also need a solution for the natural gas we are using, and it's about 10 megawatt hours in Hamburg we're using for heating requirements, and we have to replace them too. And that's a long perspective, as to say, and we have no really answer on it now. And so long we have no answer, we are preparing to use hydrogen also for the heating requirements, as long we see what has happened in the future, and nobody knows what happens in 2 years, 10 years. But at the moment, we are heading forward to replace all the industry and heavy load traffic. So we just, the starting point is for us in Hamburg, it's the industry and the heavy traffic.
Yeah. So, Bert, when it comes to, let's say, the role of Gasunie, you're probably even on a larger scale, you're the provider of the grid network in Germany as well as in the Netherlands and other places. And I know very well that you're already working very intensively on the subject of hydrogen. And is the plans that we heard from Michael, is that in line with your ideas? And what on top of that is probably what you are heading for, what you intend to do?
Yeah, indeed. In that respect, we are indeed aligned. Gasunie as a company is an energy network operator. At the moment, mainly natural gas, but the energy transition will bring a shift to green gas, but largely hydrogen. And our expectation is that although it's a very small molecule, the hydrogen molecule, it can play a big role in the energy mix in the future. And the main thing is that in this transition to hydrogen, it means that we can use the existing gas infrastructure that we have in place, but also that the colleagues have in place, that it will retain its value to society. And I think the key part is that it can enable the transmission of energy in a cost-effective way. And if we are talking about the target groups that we are focusing on, and traditionally we are connected already to the larger energy consumers, so that is our natural habitat. So it does make sense that we focus on these consumers, like industrial consumers, power plants. But I think the key driver should not be what feels comfortable for us, but the key driver should be what society needs. And I think the value of hydrogen lies particularly in those consumers which are difficult to electrify. So indeed, the industrial processes with high temperature heat, where especially the features of hydrogen bring the maximum value. So to be indeed mainly focus on industrial consumers, power plants, and the like. Yes.
Yeah. And I remember that last year you presented together with some other European gas grid operators the ideas for a trans-European hydrogen backbone. So not only locally, but really on a large scale. Could you elaborate a bit more on, firstly, the plans, so beyond Gasunie with the other colleagues, and what the reaction, if there are any until now, within the European decision makers, like in politics and so on, where here in Germany and probably across Europe? And third question, what is the next step that you are heading for, what you are planning for the realization, and what needs to be done about that?
Yeah, correct. It's very encouraging to see that there are a lot of initiatives in Europe which are heading in the same direction. And indeed, a hydrogen backbone or a large-scale connected infrastructure in Europe is definitely one of them. And there we are not alone, and there we see indeed that colleague companies are developing something similar. And I think the reason why it makes sense is that you need to bridge the distance and the gap between demand and supply, but not only in terms of distance, so bringing the energy carrier from A to B, but also connecting, for example, to alternative sources of import, and also very importantly, connecting to storage facilities to have the flexibility in the system. And I think it's very cost effective if that is done on a larger scale, where you can exchange the shortages and surpluses, and therefore a largely connected network makes more sense than focusing on, say, operating in smaller islands. Yeah. I think it is of benefit to everybody to have access to different supply sources and to flexibility.
So it's not only a safe supply that you would warranty for the industry in using and transforming the gas grid, but also you have huge storage capacities. And storage is always one of the core points that we discuss in the hydrogen industry. And you mentioned another point that I will come back to later, and that is to have the full network using, for the example, the import or the production of hydrogen and bringing it to the potential customers. And with that, I come back to Michael, and probably you gave us some information about your plans specifically here in Hamburg, but they are very concrete. You have explained that in the coming years already you will, within the port, bring the hydrogen from the plant electrolyzer, or even from a couple of electrolyzers that will be installed in an ecosystem within the port to the customers. What's the timeline there, and can you give us a bit more information probably? How is this done technically, and what are the hurdles there? What needs to be overcome? What are the next steps again for you?
Oh, it's a lot of questions then. What are the hurdles as well? Yeah, but anyway, it's somehow it's a little bit like Gasunie do, and so we have at the moment we're starting with the IPSI, the important project of common European interest requirement that we have want to build up a hydrogen network inside the harbor, and that's some kind of a dual strategy, because we have to build up forward a parallel network, because we have to settle a transformation process in the industry. Our industrial customers are not able to switch from one day to the other from hydrogen to natural gas, and so we have to have a agreement or some as a transformation process that we can deliver them on both sides, sometimes with natural gas and on the other hand with hydrogen, so they can move step by step inside the hydrogen timeline. And that's what we are doing at the moment. We are planning a starting network only for hydrogen, and somehow we can just switch and get the transformation process aligned with the customer needs. That's one point. And afterwards, for the let's say making the mesh denser, we also thinking of to reduce or to switch on from natural gas pipelines to hydrogen pipelines. That's what Gasnetz is doing as well, and so we can learn from them and get the information and the knowledge from them. But at the moment, it's just on that we are planning on that we're having 2025. That's the point when some industrial customers has announced to use hydrogen in Hamburg, and also we're getting some electrolyzers. So we have production in Hamburg as well, and we want to have a marketplace for both them, for the industrial customers, but also for the producers. And on the other hand, we have a big harbor in Hamburg, and we are thinking about import from hydrogen as well. So we have a platform. Our grid is a platform where the market can take place, and we launch the hydrogen market in Hamburg. Therefore, that's our idea. And
Now, Bert, Michael has explained the concept we have here in Hamburg. Is that in line with your plans, or is that more or less a different concept? So what are you intending to do?
No, it's there we are really synchronized. Anyhow, we have a good exchange already with the colleagues in Hamburg, and our networks are connected today already. And also within the IPSI projects, we took a coordinated approach. So we exchanged the ideas that Hamburg has on their network development ideas and their IPSI proposals, and we had the same. And there we also exchanged supporting letters that indeed we stress the importance of both projects. So there's a good collaboration going on that front, and I think that is, in my view, the key for this energy transition. It needs to be done in a collaborative fashion based on cooperation. I think everybody benefits if we can jointly, kickstart the hydrogen economy. Later on, when the market is fully developed, we will see who has which position. But at this point, I think it benefits society if we jointly make this step towards a sustainable energy sector.
So from your point of view, let's say, what are the most pressing hurdles? What are the obstacles that you, in your priority list, would be first, and what can be done about that in cooperation, in collaboration with your colleagues in Hamburg and elsewhere?
Yeah, I think to start with, first and foremost, we need to ensure, and we are ensuring, that a conversion of existing assets to hydrogen is done and will be done safely. And towards that end, we are very active. For example, in groups like DVKW, where one of my colleagues is leading one of the working groups and participating in the development of numerical standards where many players from the industry are involved. So technical standards for pipelines, for compressor stations, for valves, and that's where many stakeholders from the industry work together already. So that's on the safety and technical front. Another aspect is more related to the market, for example, guarantees of origin of hydrogen, and that it's clear what is the source of hydrogen, and also the facilitation of the market. The market is small at the moment, but we already need to prepare a trading platform so that the market can mature and suppliers and demand know how to meet. But it all starts with the fact that we need to reach each other logistically. Otherwise, I cannot sell my hydrogen molecules to you if the highway is not available to reach the destination. So it's safety, technical, market, and indeed, you mentioned it already, very important aspect as well is the regulatory side of things.
But it seems to me Michael mentioned before that you are working in a step-by-step approach. So if I have a look at the, let's say, at the economies, especially at the demand side, so this conversion of the grid can only be financed if I have somebody to pay for, which is the market side, which is the demand side on the other hand. And the cost for the adaptation for potential replacement of infrastructure are high. There has been a paper just a couple of weeks ago that this needs an investment in the billions. So we have, on the one hand, we have the problem that demand is only slowly growing, and on the other hand, even though it's a step-by-step approach, this needs quite high sums in the infrastructure costs, be it CapEx or be it OpEx then. What's the concept to overcome this delta here?
I think we jointly need to look for the best solution. This would be the answer if I'm being very diplomatic now, but to try to answer your question as specifically as possible. I agree with you, the market is small at the moment. And if we convert large-scale infrastructure for hydrogen, it is very likely that this capacity of this transport capacity which we make available is higher than the temporary demand. However, it would make no sense to do it in a stepwise fashion. Building a new, very small pipeline which fits exactly to the demand may be perhaps economically efficient from a textbook, but if you look at the longer run, it does make sense of converting an existing larger pipeline to hydrogen. Then yes, in the first stages there is an excess of capacity, but this excess of capacity also stimulates the development of the market. So in my view, having logistic capacity in place is conditional to the function of the market. I think if you wait for the market and then for the demand of transport capacity, then we won't be successful in, say, cutting short this chicken egg problem. These are some first ideas, but perhaps Michael, perhaps you can add to that as well.
So coming back to the situation in Hamburg is that it's not a standalone solution, but right from the start you are thinking and planning about a connection within the overall European gas grid in order not only because you have to store and transport large volumes, but also because when, for example, we're thinking about Hamburg as a port, importing in the future even larger volumes of hydrogen, then we need to have the connection directly to the European grid. So is that question to Bert again, is that also something that you think about, that you have the overall connection between import and the gas grid across Europe? And what role would you see for Germany, for Hamburg, in comparison, for example, to the Netherlands and other countries?
Yeah, indeed, that's ultimately the view that we and I also have, that ultimately we are aiming for a European or a continental market. But let's be honest, that will not happen in one go. So as with colleagues in Hamburg, Also, our first step is to develop a regional infrastructure, and based on that, start the rollout, the phased rollout into ultimately a backbone. And then ultimately, we connect to other regions, to storage facilities further away, and to production further away. But it's clear that an energy island will not work. Going into a European backbone in one step will not work. It needs this phased approach, and then indeed the connections and initiatives in industrial and dense areas are very important, like the example of Hamburg, where you also have on the one hand, the port facilities, so that you also can look at the import via ships in various forms available. If that could feed into the German system, that would be very good, because it's clear that there's a large demand potential for hydrogen in Germany, but it needs to be sourced from various places. There will be production in Germany itself, but the current study shows that import is needed. That can come from the Netherlands, that will probably come via the Netherlands, and indeed Michael mentioned Denmark already, but I think also via the ports that could provide very interesting supply routes. And then this connectivity in northern Germany between the various industrial areas, I think is key to also provide a confidence to the industrial consumers that indeed their supply is there, that they have access to a number of supply sources and flexibility. I think that's important for industrial consumers to have that assurance.
Yeah. So that means in the future we will never have islands, because even from the start it may be a convincing concept, like in Hamburg, that you have an local ecosystem with production, with import, with the grid, with especially the demand. But then right from the start we need to think about how to connect that with other areas across Europe, and then via the Netherlands, via parts of Germany, via other regions, we will have, let's say, a kind of a local distribution based, which leaves enough room for the economy to get their hydrogen via their preferred pathway. That's the idea, I think, behind that. But even though my understanding is that we need situations like in Hamburg, where we have a forerunner that demonstrates on their specific scale that the economy can work, even with the investments needed. Back to Michael, once again, specific timeline in Hamburg?
Yeah, our timeline is that we're starting today planning, and that needs a lot of time if you want to build up or construct new pipes in the harbor. But we think about connecting the first customers. As you said, you have got a common IPSAI call that we have in Hamburg, and we are thinking about connecting the first customers, Moorburg, which is the production site, in 2025. And there are some customers need some hydrogen as well in 2025, and that will develop on demand, on tasks that we want to connect with Gasunie in 2025, 2026. That's our plan, and there are some import ideas also. So that is the moving target, but at the actual plan we have in the project, it's we wanted to put in to live in the pipelines in 2025.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit further.
Yeah. Okay, understood. To put it in a nutshell from my point of view, converting the gas grid to hydrogen is a good investment in a sustainable future. It not only saves one of the best functioning assets that we have all across Europe, but also gives it a perspective for a CO2-free future, which is something that we all need. So thank you for showing this is possible, and you're working on it very strongly to realize that. Thank you for that, and hope to hear more good news from you in the future. Thanks for today.